integrated into the UI itself. How is that going at the moment?
I was fixing a YouTube thing. Somebody was saying that
Yeah,
the audio was low. So I just fixed that. Can you ask me that question one more time? I'm so sorry.
that's right. So the next thing that I want to kind of touch base on is the yesterday you showed me in winter the SOC as well as the wall and gate upgrading system being actually integrated into the UI itself. How is that
Oh,
going yesterday? Because
yeah.
I know yesterday you were having a
Yeah, we
couple of
got those
issues with it.
ironed out. So here, let me close these pictures and then bring it up. And let me go into no, this map is fine. It has my operator test that I was doing, but it's fine. So we've kind of been prototyping a new sock with my artists. And the idea is that we made a mistake where we made it to where the ammo crate could land in a gameplay area. And I've been playing a lot of Halo Wars and a lot of other games to kind of get some inspiration and some ideas. And one thing that my artist was kind of able to whip up as kind of like a proof of concept was this approach for the replace sock, where it's kind of like a little emplacement, like a defense emplacement kind of deal, and you have like a little like flare that's going off, and then you have like little areas where like the upgrades appear. This is more of a proof of concept. This is one of those examples where like now that we got it working functionally, he'll go back and change it sometime in between of like working on other tasks. But this is like just to kind of get the ball rolling. So you can see we got it all working and the money comes in and it drops and it gives you money up there. And then we got the upgrade system working. Because previously I was doing console commands every week. And this was part of that push to get the game to the point where you guys can actually play it, the end user. Because like you figure like a lot of systems were like, okay, you have to use console commands. You have to use like these like things that only a developer would know. So like now we're starting to take the game and make it less dev and more like end user oriented, where it's like, okay, like an actual person could pick up the game and play it. They could upgrade their gates, they could upgrade their walls, they could upgrade their socks, and it just works. And that was something that came in like, towards the mid part of the week, is adding a new like way of interacting with upgrades. So it's a lot more easier and streamlined via just referencing metadata for like essentially like what we want to upgrade to. So if I choose tier 3, then basically, let me turn off my breakpoint. So I was breakporting stuff all night. So like it freezes the editor because I was testing code last night. But you can see now it's a tier 3 sock. And then in a couple seconds, it'll come down, it'll drop a crate, and that one will be, like 600 cash. So like we got all of that working, and it works in replication. So I'll show that in a second. So whenever it drops in a second, there it goes. So we got that, and then you can see it like in the little mesh changes. Again, this one is a placeholder. This is one of those examples where like we did the mock-up, and then he's gonna have to go back when we do have some free time and solidify this design and get it more like fleshed out. So, but if I close the play session and I go half and half, let me actually make it a listen client with 2 players. You'll see that it actually is replicated and working in multiplayer. And that's one of the biggest things that we did this week, is making sure that the upgrade system and like everything else was fully functional with like the socks. Because we based the upgrade system with the walls. Like I mentioned this previously a couple weeks ago, where we built the upgrade system into the base underlying structure system. And that way it made it to where when we did the walls and the gates upgrades, it would extend to the socks, or if we had a barracks upgrade system or a motor pool upgrade system, it would facilitate that. If we ever added a turret upgrade system, it would facilitate that. So that was the biggest thing this time around, was to take the time for that modularity and that extendability to make it to where it's very easy to add more content to the game. So like I was able to get this replication and all this stuff situated pretty goddamn fast in record time. And then I can upgrade it to a tier 2. And let's see, did it break on that one? Okay, that's broken. So I'll have to look into that one. So there's some kind of UI bug going on there. So we'll look into that. But basically I can upgrade it, and the actual socks go. So it's probably a chain of custody or like an ownership issue, or an RPC is probably being rejected. So I'll have to look into that going into Monday. Well, that's what I mean. Like we just got that UI in, and now we're bug testing, and we're looking for that kind of stuff, and we're fixing it as we go. And I'll show you guys the progress that we've had from the last combat test to the current combat test, and it's day and night in terms of the amount of progress we had. But we'll get onto that in a second. But you can see, like, like the boxes are coming in. It's giving money. It's synchronized between both clients. We'll wait for one more drop because I want to look for, I just think I noticed another bug, so I was going to write that down in my notebook. Let me see if it does it. No, it's not doing it. I had looked at it wrong. So basically, yeah. So we have all this set up, and the money system is now replicating it in. And then we do have it to where if you destroy it, it goes back to the hologram. Another player can come in and build. It has a system where only one person can attach it at a time. So if one person's placing a structure, another person can't do a duplication bug and basically be able to place both in at the same time, and then it's able to build two. So quite a bit of time and effort went into basically making sure you can't do that over the course of the week. I mean, I'm sure somebody might find a way, and we'll have to look out for that for bug testing when it comes to actually getting all this content in your guys' hands. Because I talked about this previously on the public Discord, is that right now, like you figure like we're really, really close to being able to give it to other people to play test. But we just there's a couple other things that we're going to go over in this discussion today to kind of show where we are in terms of being able to get it to a point where we can give it to you guys. So you guys can play it, whether it be just single player, if we can't get the back end working just right off the bat immediately. But we'll get into that because I'm getting ahead of myself now. So you figure, here's that. What's the next thing we have on the agenda, Derivar?
The next thing we've got is the
oh yes, that's a big one. So here, let me delete. Yeah. I'll place her back in later. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab an infected class, and we're gonna put in the H version, make it bigger because this is something where you need to kind of see it like full screen. And then we're going to change his health to something obscene. Let's change it to 5,000. And then we'll change his max health to 5,000. Then we're going to save it, play in. And one thing you're going to notice right off the bat with this push that we did was we had a poll on the Discord. And the poll was based on the idea of target acquisition and like time on target. Like, like how long does it take for them to actually shoot a target? How do they handle target acquisition? When do they decide to shoot? Can they do suppressive fire? Like those kind of things, right? And it was like 98% in favor of redoing the entire system in terms of how targets are acquired, when they're allowed to shoot, and the rules that, constrain that. So you're going to notice a couple of things, and let me unpause it. You're going to notice that the closer the target is, the more he fires in bursts. So if I F8 and I move this infected back, and then I F8 again, you'll notice that he's trying to fire in smaller controlled bursts, and he's trying to keep his hit probability and his fire rate confidence and his current spread manageable. So in real time, he's trying to just okay, I got to maintain some kind of fire control. I have to make sure that my spread is realistic in terms of okay, I can't just go full auto. And the idea that the leveling or the proficiency of a unit from rank 1 to rank 5 dictate how good he is at handling the weapon, how good he is at basically controlling his spread, and generally how soon he'll open up, because his fire rate confidence will go higher. So his fire rate confidence also helps to dictate, how is he going to be shooting, how is he going to handle himself. So as I move closer, you'll notice that he'll start to go full auto if the guy, oh, he's dead now. Yeah, he's dead as fuck. So I'm going to restart that session. And then let me go ahead and, God, I hate when it does that. I got to look into that bug. But you'll notice that as he gets closer, he'll hold down the trigger and he'll go full auto basically. And that's just because his fire rate confidence is higher. Because he figures he doesn't have to worry about missing as much because the spread isn't as large. And the spread is basically a circle around where he's firing. So the idea is that you figure like as he shoots, it's simulating the bullets just kind of jumping around, going in a circle. And he just tries to keep that spread lower and more manageable up to the maximum that each gun is rated for. So it's just one of those things that we kind of did to where like, because back in the day, we'd get a lot of feedback, complaints, whatever you want to say, in terms of the reliability of units, and that it just seemed like units were having a staring contest sometimes. Some SOC units would take longer than it seemed like they should to engage their targets. So we were like, okay, well, let's see if we can address that now in this rebuild of like, you know, changing how units go about attacking. Because you figure even if their firing confidence is not extremely high, they'll open up substantially sooner to shoot a target. You know, they might miss, but you'll still hit secondary targets. You'll still hit the arms. You'll still hit the legs. So there's still some suppressive fire going on now in case of the old system. The old system was basically, I see someone, I'm going to count to 100, and each unit, each class had a different rate that they counted to. So a sniper's target acquisition counted faster than, say, an assault. And the idea is that you figure like, actually, no, my bad. The sniper was slower, and the assault was faster, but the spec ops was the fastest out of all of them. So the idea is that you figure different units had different predispositions of how quickly they could count to 100. And like this one would add 5 every 0.1 seconds. That one would add 10 every 0.1 seconds. And that was, the idea was to simulate they were lining up their gun, they were aiming, and they were shooting at said target. And then again, with this newer system, it's a little more fluid. I think Winter called it more cinematic. Is the simplest way? Did you want to talk about that? What you were talking about last night?
Yeah, much more cinematic.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. Also, hi. I just spent like an hour trying to fix my internet. But yeah, and you were mentioning about this, how it would sometimes they would be really stupid, where like if enemies would like suddenly appear around the corner, sometimes they'd be like,
yeah.
But with this, it's more like they'll see something, you know, start taking some shots. And I had some questions actually about this. I was curious if like, will this sort of act as a bit of a range increase for most units, in the sense of like they'll actually take some shots further
because
out?
Previously,
or
you go.
And
previously,
no, you go. I think I had a second.
Because previously, if you think about it, based off of the legacy system, if they lost line, like let's say you had a unit that was crisscrossing between these objects you see on the right, if they did not hit 100%, oh, I hit the mouse. Okay, hold on. I'm like, my screen is like fucking with me. But let's say, for instance, they were crisscrossing in between these pillars. In Legacy, they wouldn't take the shot. In the new one, they will take the shot, and they'll shoot the arms, the legs, the arm, anything they can. They might miss. They might instead hit a secondary target, but there's more suppressive fire going on, and there's more back and forth going on, more like Company of Heroes or like Halo Wars, where it's like not every shot always hits, so they're not super accurate and like John Wick's all the time. And obviously, the proficiency and the accuracy substantially jumps every level that you go up, is the idea that we're building towards. So then that way, there's more importance to actually leveling up your units, training up proficiency. You lose a tier 5, it actually sucks. It's like, oh, wow, okay. Like, now I have to kind of deal with these grunts, these recruits again, get them back up to a higher level because they actually have a difference in combat. Not only do we increase the health, not only do we basically, it's not only do we increase the health, but now it's more on their actual combat proficiency. In terms of like, you know, how quickly they gain that confidence to pull down the trigger, what kind of like burst discipline do they use? Because you figure like as they're closer, they'll have a different burst discipline based off of like the different factors that come into play. Where it's like, as I move over here and get closer, he's gonna hold down the trigger because he knows he's not gonna miss.
Yeah. One of the things that also like this was one thing I brought up a while ago, I think, as a bug report because I thought it was broken. But I was using the Bradley, and it was just like not shooting until enemies were point blank.
So that could have been
and I was like,
that could have been their target
why?
acquisition failing. That could have been an object in the trace that was being blocked by something bogus that a level designer or a QA tester missed. So it's one of those things where it's like, we're going to have to keep an eye out for those, because you figure the biggest push that we've had this time is having more debugging logic and more supportive logic to let us know when something's failing, like having the draw debug strings or having like the draw debug lines and spears and whatnot to kind of help us gauge like what the hell is going on. One of the other things that you'll notice is their gun actually stays the hell up, and their gun actually goes down, and that's replicated. So I didn't really pay much attention to that, but if I actually, yeah, it's working. Because last week they were shooting with their gun down, and it was literally annoying. Like, it was so annoying. Oh, that's a new bug.
They had the curved barrels.
Yeah, I guess
okay.
Yeah, no, so that's a bug we gotta look into. They can see it. I'm assuming that it fixes, yeah, it's a fog of war bug where they can still attack their target, but for whatever reason, and then you can see there's a desync going on right now where for whatever reason he crippled that infected, but it's not synchronizing the state that he's crippled, but he is moving at a slower rate. So there's a state, and then he also shot to disarm. So he had a melee weapon in his arm, and when he broke his arm, or rather, see now you're just magically fixed. When he broke his legs, he drops melee weapons by default, and when that happened, it caused some kind of desync. So that's something we're gonna have to play test and try and catch before we get to you guys, because these are the things that we're kind of testing right now to hunt down and resolve. But you can see there's a perfect example of like, okay, like now that combat's over, his gun is down. And the gun is down both the host and the client. So we've been kind of going through and just kind of having like an attack list that we go through as we keep stress testing that horde map and as we start to introduce combat into the maps. Because previously, a couple of weeks ago, there was like a standard infected that was just standing here all the time, and they didn't know how to attack each other, and they didn't know what was going on. So it was one of those things where we've just kind of been working through that. And you can also see that little Timmy here is now infected. So he got bit, or he got mauled just enough to where when that number hits 0, he's going to turn and try and kill everyone. So now you get so that's one of the things that now that's replicating and working on the server, where it's like when that hits 0, he's going to turn, you're going to lose control of that unit. Now keep in mind these numbers, these infection rates for like when you take melee damage versus like a melee weapon still haven't been balanced, and they haven't been play tested. So some of these numbers are really high, so we can just kind of test all the variations and things that could occur in gameplay. So I would say that the chance of him getting infected will be a little bit half of what you just saw, because he's infected right now, so he's kind of fucked unless I get him to a medical tent, and then they can triage him, but they can't cure him. So it'll just buy him time until you end up sending him out to the pasture, or basically he dies in combat is the idea. Because right now there's no cure per se in terms of like the Pangu virus. So it's one of those things where they're just trying to do the best to just kind of extend life. So we got that working. Sure.
Take him on the woodshed.
We've got a vaccine.
Oh Lord,
it's 9mm.
What else have we got on the list, Dervar? Oh, in winter. Another year.
Okay, so we also talked about the run sprint state.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that you guys saw for the last couple of weeks, where when they would sprint, they would not sprint correctly, and what we ended up doing was just properly actually updating the animation blueprint and getting everything situated. So when they actually sprint, they sprint on all clients, and you can actually visually see it. Because before they were just walking, but at a faster pace. And then I'll show that really quickly. But we also put it in. So like if I build a structure, they auto run now. Previously they were just walking with like the last couple of weeks of progress that I showed. So we got that in there. And now they actually run to their target like they did in Legacy. You'll also notice involuntarily, I just kind of snuck this in there, is that the Garrison tents work now. So I built that Garrison tent, and now it's replicated on the multiplayer, is that the population increased for both clients. And if I destroy the structure, then it goes away. It goes back to 12. And it supports overflow. So I'll have to potentially go to a larger map for this to show it. But if I go to the large RTS test map, yeah, that'll work. And then basically I do this, spawn in. Oh yeah, they were shooting at an infected over there. And then if I build a bunch of tents, oh, right. Let me zoom out the second monitor. So you see they hit the max pop of 80. But then if I an extra one's there. So if I delete this one, nothing happens. But then if I delete that one, then it goes back to 72. So the idea that you can, like, it's like an every other RTS game. We just put it in there because you're supposed to have that in there. Is that basically like, so it allows you to build an overflow for population where you can have redundancies on redundancies like you do for power, like you do for population, where you can have extra tents or other houses in other areas of the map. So if you lose a critical base, you could have a redundancy of tents that support your overflow per se. So that way we didn't essentially do that. Okay, so then the next thing would be basically what else do we have on the list for this week?
So we have replicated the population, added the garrison tent, and population.
Oh yeah, I
overflow
just covered that.
supported by the garrison, by the tents.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Sorry, I had my headphones off for a minute. I had to listen for something else. Yep. What's needed before the playtest is able to be launched internally?
All right, so as it stands right now, we shared a list on the public Discord about 2 weeks ago, and we've carved off about almost half of that list. So here, let me delete this. This is a crude list that I'll just kind of bring over from my Word document. But as it stands right now, these are the things that we're kind of going through to kind of have our first playtest so we can playtest the game internally. As it stands right now, replicating fire modes is done. I have to just do some final approval. The, The population, I think I deleted that. Yeah, the population's done. This is done pending an actual playtest to see if it does come back, if there's any issues. Let's see. And then it's I'm working on this one right now, and I'll have some progress to show for that in a second. And then the structures are practically almost done. We're just basically waiting for a couple more things we need to test and do over the next couple of work days to make sure we didn't miss anything and make sure there's no weird replication bugs that are occurring. Like we need to test different permutations, like attacking and then building and then that kind of stuff. So some of that might come down to playtesting, and we're like, oh wait, we need to revisit or tweak up this or change that or whatever. So it's one of those things where it's like we're just kind of trying to power through this to finish phase one. Ideally, this entire list does not need to be done to do a playtest. It's just the more mission critical stuff, like getting the base structures in, and then finishing up the mini map theoretically doesn't need to be done based off of smaller maps. So I think it's just the structures, the ability system, and the grenade system, and then making sure that the infected and the circ work out of the special game modes. So I would wager we're aiming for roughly about another week or two to get to the point where we can play a full session. We were trying to aim for Wednesday, but that didn't happen based off of just other things that just needed to get in. Some other bugs came up, and X, Y, and Z, and then we still needed to get the population and all that in. So we're getting really close to where we can actually sit down and play test, and we can actually show you guys on a podcast, because that's ultimately the goal, is to basically get to a point like on a Saturday, whether it be next Saturday or a Saturday off of that, where Michael can host the game or someone else can host the game, and we can show you guys how the game is playing in the map. And then a week or two after you see us playing would be when we basically get it in y'all's hand. So like I mentioned previously on the Discord, we should be able to get you guys something by like the end of this month at this point, like the next 1 to 2 weeks, because like right now, me and Derek were just talking about this yesterday. We're going to focus going into next week. We're going to be focusing on the ability system and getting the grenades and the headshot, like the proof of concept of like the 3 abilities, like the so that way we can get all that working. We're going to be working on any combat or like AI issues that remain, like what you saw, where like the infected desynchronization occurs, where like if one person becomes a crawler, it doesn't always sync between both clients, making sure that doesn't happen anymore. And then fixing that fog of war issue you saw, where your units could see them, but you couldn't see them. And they were shooting at something that didn't exist on your screen per se. And it didn't update until the fog of war basically like you saw them and then you didn't see them again. So one thing I did want to show is, let me load into where are you? Co-op test map? No, it was this one. Then we go half and half and zoom out. Now, one of the issues that we came into is that, like, it was kind of funny actually, is that there were quite a few issues with like essentially the units being a little too effective because they were being like little mini John Wicks. So we spent a considerable amount of time just making sure they just had an actual proper rotation rate, and then just kind of getting their combat all situated and set up. You can see that they're a lot better than last week, but they're not like there's no grenade throwing. That's what I mean by the ability system, where like we need to kind of go in and get all that situated. And there's still some odd errors that are going on where like these traces are going off to the nether realms. So we need to hunt down where in their AI. I think that's okay. And just kind of clean it up a little bit more. But you can see that this is like literally day and night to what it was before last week. And like you can see, some infected aren't always respecting the orders that they're told to attack the gate. And it's more so just us just ratcheting up just basically the process. Did I really just get my camera stuck in something? Great. So that's something else we need to do, is we need to add a little bit more corrective logic to the fences, not the fences, the player cameras, because there are some situations where it's really easy to get stuck in there. And then the corrective logic that I put in there to make it to where you can't clip into objects also permanently gets you stuck in said object. So that's something that I'm going to be working on before we get it to you guys to playtest, is hunting those down and playtesting them to make sure that like you never are in a situation where you're screwed like this. And this is simulating 2 players playing together. So this would be like if I hosted a server and little Timmy joins and plays with me, kind of deal. It's like, I could order these guys to move, and then player 1's like, well, I want to move that over there, and let's move this guy here, and blah, blah, blah. And then maybe player 2 is like, well, I'm going to take control of these 2 players, and you control those 2. So that's the general gist, is just getting the co-op to a point where like it doesn't, it's pretty damn good, but it's not there yet. Like you figure, like I can't click on my assault and, oh, that's not an assault. I can't click on my assault and be like, throw grenade, or there's no assault here, I lied. They're all engineers, but you get the point. You can build, but you figure it's one of those things where it's like the active denial system doesn't do anything yet. The spotlight doesn't do anything yet, because we've been focusing more on the core fundamentals of the game, of like the units hearing, seeing, co-op in terms of basically gifting units, the foundation. And then once we were happy with that, then we were going to do a couple of days of just getting the remaining structures online, and then do the ability system. And then from there have an internal playtest and make sure that when we do the structures this time around, because right now, the AI aren't that super sophisticated of understanding. Like I think Terminal and a couple other cats have been pushing for us to add a lot more miscellaneous clutter. So I'm going to use this as an excuse going into next week to just tighten up how they handle doing threat analysis, because you figure like they need to understand this is not a threat to them. And unless it's in their direct path to stop you from getting to their target, they need to bypass it per se. So it's one of those things where it's like, that's something that we're going to be doing going into next week. To just make it to where if you just build a bunch of clutter playing on co-op, or if we do it, or if you guys do it, and the playtest, it's not GG, you win. They understand there's some kind of like sweep that runs along the navigation mesh that is able to determine this is where I'm at, this is where I need to go, and I need to rate objects along the navigation mesh. to basically determine this is an actual problem, this is not a problem. So if there's a guard tower, they assign a high priority to take that out. If there's like fences and netting, they'll only prioritize it if it's going to increase their move cost above a certain margin. So like you say, they have to go all the way around or go in this area. They'd be like, well, can we attack these barbed wire? Can we attack these walls? What would be our move cost if those walls didn't exist? So it's one of those things where like, those are systems that we're going to be baking in and situating next week. And I don't want to rush it. So you figure like that might be worst case where like, depending on just how things go with the AI, that might elongate it a little bit, but we might just be able to get a build out and then put a disclaimer on there and be like, look, the AI are going to need at least another couple of days, another week for us to get it to where they fully understand that if you got a master turtler and that master turtler is building Fort Knox, they understand how to get to that player. And not basically be abused like they are in Legacy, where it's so easy to break their AI. So yeah, and then here I'll show you some of the other stuff in practicality. You can see that essentially the what am I talking of? You can see that the synchronization is now working. We're being able to see walls. I showed that off very briefly last week, but that is functioning, so you can see other players doing their stuff. Let's see if this works. Yay, it works again. So you can snap gates on gates and gates, and you can have a gate inception if you really, really want to be that guy. So you can snap anything on anything is the idea. That has like a snap point per se. So let's see if the guys on the left are going to go over and help the guys on the right. Yeah, they are. And one's going off the Narya, so that's a bug. Where the fuck are you going? Oh, you know what? That's a bug. He's trying to call in this barracks. Yeah, that's a bug. So that's what I mean. We have to hunt those down, and that just caused the crash, actually. So ain't that but a bitch? Yeah. So for whatever reason, he thought that structure was not deployed yet, even though it has been deployed, because it was pre-placed by a level designer. So that was the issue there. So we're hunting those things down. So that was a bug where basically he thought, oh, I should go help build that barracks. Wait. The barracks is not done. It is done. And then it causes a crash because it's an order of operations thing where some things aren't prepared or created for that moment because it was already done. Like it was just a barracks that Derek placed in that basically the system doesn't fully support level designers placing pre-placed assets in the level. So we have to go in and course correct that and figure out why that's happening. So that'll be something that we look into going into next week because we want to be able to have scenario maps where we can have like a barracks or a circ tent or walls pre-placed and you guys can maintain it or build off of them and whatnot. So that's fun. Let me see if it's going. Come on. Don't do this to me, Windows 11. God damn it, Windows 11. Like the bastard child.
It's if I can get my damn Discord to open up again. It's interesting that you brought this up because literally just in the chat before, Earth Alchemist was talking about birds who were just attacking his walls instead of flying over. Like,
so there's a system. How Legacy was programmed with the AI is that they don't understand the concept of walls. They only understand they can't reach their target. So what it does is if they can't reach their target, it keeps increasing the threat of walls in the hope that they're going to reach their target eventually by rechecking when the walls are destroyed instead of having a fundamental understanding that the walls exist and determining, is this an actual problem? Can I go around it? Can I, destroy it and then go through that one wall chunk? Like that kind of stuff. So that's the biggest thing this time around of improving it is having it to where they have a greater understanding of their world because of how dynamic the game can be, where you have dynamic civilian groups erecting walls. You can erect walls. And that's a lot of dynamic gameplay going on at any given time that can literally just blow up an AI's pathfinding. Like there's so many variables that can occur. So it's just one of those things where like this time around, I wanted to make sure that basically what we ended up doing is that in Legacy, this was a good idea, but we need to take it a step further. Infected would rally on a commander or a leader or a central actor that would keep them together as a cohesive group. And think of it as like a squad manager or like a commander. And that commander would have a directive. Go and attack this wall. go and defend this position. But the problem was that system was too rigid. It needed to support being able to dynamically break up into subgroups dynamically on demand, and then that system needed to also do pre-scanning, like we mentioned previously, via some kind of navigation sweep or some kind of scoring system that would say, okay, yeah, this is your group. Group is trying to get from A to B, but there's C, D, and E, whatever the fuck. Like there's like other points in between. It needs to be able to inventory all that and then report back to its subordinates in that attack group. This is what you need to prioritize, or this is what you don't need to prioritize based off of your directive, your goal, what you're trying to do. So that's a big thing that we're pushing for going into next week is the ability system, and then doing whatever needs to be done to the AI to make sure they're not exploitable by implementing that system I talked about, and then making sure it's replicated, and then whatever other random bugs might present themselves. We think that it's not mission critical to get the mini-map and the patrol and the attack move in before we do the first playtest, because the maps are too small to dictate and facilitate. Like, that's not a big priority right now. Right now, we need to play the game. We need to see what ideas hold up to scrutiny in terms of like, okay, like the way we did some replication, how well does it hold up if someone joins 10 minutes into the game, 15 minutes in the game? Do certain things desync? Do certain things not spawn? You know, we need to start testing our evaluation of how replication works in the Unreal Engine, so we can go back if need be and make corrections before we go and do the more complicated systems like a patrol or all that. Because patrol is a persistent system. So it's one of those things where like have a running theory that we need to basically do more on reps instead of doing for state changes like that. So it's one of those things where we need to test that, because as far as I know, on reps are for like reoccurring, like consistent state changes for variables. But we need to test again. That's why we need to have our first play test, and we need to sit down and play it, and then see what issues that people present and report, so we can correct accordingly. But you can see, like, here's another test where it's like they're just defending the position, and you know, sometimes the horde waves don't properly respawn. Some of them aren't running at you correctly. So like those are all things that we're going to seek to eradicate going into next week. So then that way we can actually play it and show you guys something next Saturday. Because one of the biggest hurdles going into next Saturday is having it to where we have to get the Epic online backend infrastructure working. So that's going to be like a little bit of like 2 or 3 days just by itself to get that infrastructure implemented, so we can do cross-platform play between Steam and Epic and Microsoft, and we ever do consoles in the future like Space Marine 2's backend, and learn that and get it integrated. Because what that allows you to do is you don't have to do port forwarding, because it uses like Steam, where you have Steamworks and you have Epic. Steam only works on Steam. Epic only works everywhere. It works on every console, every platform that there exists under the sun. So it's one of those things where like we are on the Epic Game Store and we're on Steam. That's kind of a dick move. You'd be like, okay, like Steam guys can't play with Unreal, go fuck yourself. So it's one of those things where we're going to be implementing the Unreal one. So then that way there's a synergy across all platforms. Everyone can play with each other no matter where you bought the game. And at the same time, it's a token based off of your Steam, so you don't make an account. It works the same way as Space Marine 2 does. And we have to learn that. So that's one of the things that we're going to be going into. If it doesn't happen next week, it would happen the week after that, where we're going to have to dedicate a couple of days just sitting down and working within the ecosystem of the Unreal umbrella to get that back end working. Because in that way, we can have it to where you guys can host games, and we can host games and actually start a more public playtest for the co-op. Otherwise, if we were to release a build sooner, you'd have to either do manual port forwarding, which most people don't know how to do now. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that do, but the average person doesn't. So we're trying to eradicate that level of user sophistication by just using a proper backend that does things like NAT punch through and relay servers that makes it so where you don't have to port forward, because those things bridge connections per se in modern multiplayer games. So that's something we're going to have to learn. And it'll just be reading through documentation. So if I were to give you like a worst case scenario, that might be something that kind of elongates and makes it to where it takes a little bit longer to get the multiplayer playtest in your guys' hands. And instead, you just have a couple of single player sessions like this that you can playtest, give us feedback, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, while we're learning the presence and the backends and all those systems that Unreal gives to us, or Epic Games. Sorry. So that is in a nutshell, and that's where we're currently aiming for the next 1 to 2 weeks. Is getting that situated so that way we can get it in y'all's hands. What else do you guys have to throw in there for Duravar? Why not? Winter.
Well, yeah. Is your house burnt down,
Of me?
Danavir? No, he messaged me and he was like, "Can you take over quickly? I can
Lord.
smell something burning."
Okay. All you, Winter.
Yeah. Did we
No,
get
Chris is
Chris
sick
to
today.
talk about log?
Yep.
Oh, rip.
Indeed. We
That's
haven't
a
gotten
tragedy.
Efren, we haven't gotten Michael to talk
I
about what they're
think
doing.
we might. Well, all right. It's not in Donavia's notes. This guy is his notes are a
Okay.
mess.
Well, I'm gonna load up the Alcatraz. Efren, you want to take over?
Yeah. Okay. I think it'll be
Yes.
them and then Q&A.
Be sure to update.
Dang it.
I added something
Okay,
this
I'll update
morning.
right now. Hold on 1 sec. Let me close down the engine and I will load that up. And then boom, 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 boom. Okay, I'm getting your assets now. Let me just not move that over to the other viewport so they can't see our IP addresses. Last thing I want is someone DDoSing me and taking time away from development. Yeah, somebody was DDoSing our website over the week. That was fun. I still have to go back. Yeah, I still have to go back and basically scan the website and check to see if they put anything on there. But it's like, do you seriously? Like, I don't have the time for this. Okay, so if I go to actually just one more thing really quickly, I want to show just super duper fast, and then Efren can talk. Talk. So this is the last thing. Nah.
Also, I heard that, Winter. You calling my notes a mess. I'm not used to. I told you, I'm used to just winging it.
You're fine. I'm just like, I was like, 1, no, 3, no. Where are we?
What?
Anyway,
It's they're just out of lines. They're in like the wrong positions. That's the only issue with them.
I probably have to regenerate the code. Did he just commit? Okay, yeah. Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna have to regenerate the code for some reason. What I wanted to show is not playing nicely with me because I just put in a system for possessing the operator from the RTS. And I was setting that up because that was one of the last line items. Well, that was on the list I showed you guys earlier, where it was one of the last line items we needed to get in there just so that you can actually switch back and forth between RTS and normal. But I guess when I updated, it merged the player controller class with the DLLs and changes that Derek did last night. And that made it to where I don't have the most up-to-date version of my code. So, because I was just literally working on it right before the podcast. So, give me 1 second, Efren, because I can't open the engine while it's recompiling. Let me switch back to the main room so you guys don't have to stare at Lita, or not Lita, the girl 2V or whatever it is from Nier Automata. And, okay, so what else? Do you guys want to take 1 or 2 questions while I stall for it to show the last thing?
1 or 2 questions to stall. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll get everyone in the chat to ask, and just anything. Just ask questions, and I'll say that's a great question. I will compliment you for asking a question. So please type things.
Earlier, someone brought up about CRAM or something like that. Hang on, it's towards the beginning. Any thoughts on CRAM?
Can someone remind me what a CRAM is, please?
It's a RAM.
Like
it's a land-based.
The big angry Seawiz. The new basic
There's no plans for that right
pretty
now.
much
Ultimately,
that, right?
That's something that me and Dimitri agreed on. Is that right now we're looking at 2. The only other turret that we're thinking about looking is the anti-armored one, and right now we're looking at the base of a prototype, which is the hold on, let me get the name. The HSTV-L for basically yeah, we're looking at that turret and miniaturizing it and customizing it to make it the basis for anti-armored, like the Leviathan and the Juggernaut. Or he's also looking at the hold on, the Sheraton turret, basically. So Yeah, so those are two things that he's looking at to basically see, like, okay, we need an armored version of that turret that I showed previously. So what do we kind of want to go with is the gist. So that's something that he's just kind of working out, and then he'll present a concept or a proof of concept, and then we'll just kind of go from there and figure out what we want to do. So ideally, I'll have that to show you guys next week, and we'll just kind of go from there. Okay, let me see if it's going to place nicely now. So if okay, yeah, it's working now.
But yeah, the replacement turret, the new replacement turret is probably the closest you'll get to a CRAM.
Okay, so I just want to show you super quickly.
Basically,
this is one of the last things I was working on for the podcast. Is that I just got this set up where basically you can just possess, and you can see that the RTS HUD's still overlapping. But you can actually, like, I have to going into like today and Monday, make it to where the RTS HUD gets deleted, make sure the operator HUD comes up, set up the Call of Duty or Battlefield type transition where it pulls your camera in and out so you can play as the operator on the ground. And then you can press the key, and then it'll jump back to your RTS camera. So that's one of the biggest things that we've kind of wanted to do for like the operators, because I know some people in the chat that are like, oh, I don't know why Nightbot deleted that person's messages. But anyway, yeah, that it's only for operators. It's your special little commander units, and I just wanted to show that that's something that we're working on going into the first playtest. So then that way you guys can actually like run around and play in first person and third person. And basically just get a feel for like, okay, like this is how it would work on Pandemic in a larger scale map. Because in our mind, the first playtest needs to have the interoperability or the base gameplay of everything you can build on the barracks. If the abilities get in before the first playtest, get great. Having it to where players can switch in and out of the operators whenever the hell they want. Right now, we'll allow anyone to control anyone's operator. And then when we have the time, we'll ratchet that code up and make it to where like you can only control operators that you bring in. And then if they want us to make it more freeform, we'll look into that. But that was the plan, essentially. And then just having it to where people that are playing as operator can buy back in from the barracks, and they just parachute in on the next reinforcement wave. So if you don't want to go back to RTS when you die as an operator, it'll ask you to respawn. So that's something that I kind of neglected to mention, but something I'm working on as well amongst all the other stuff going into next week. What did you say?
Wow. I said, wow. So you're really pushing for like, if someone wants to, they can just play a third-person shooter without having to touch the RTS at all if they're joining someone.
Aspects to their RTS friends. So that way, you have a perfect cohesion of your friends that just want to play a shooter versus your friends that want to play an RTS, base builder, money management, civilian management. Because the game is so many things now. So it's one of those things where it's like everyone gets what they're looking for, and everyone's happy essentially. And yeah, that way. And then obviously I haven't shown it yet. It's something that we're going to have to sneak in over the next couple of weeks, is make it to where the operators can build. So the base underlying system's in there. We just need to find some time in the next couple of weeks between the playtests to make it to where the operators get an ability, but we're waiting. The ability system needs to come online. And then once the ability system is working for like grenades and everything else, then we'd add an ability for the for the operators so they can build. And they get like a Rust or like a Forest type prototype building system where you just like look around the map and you just place structures or whatever. So just keep in mind that that's something that we're working towards so that way the operator can contribute. Maybe not as far as getting the wall builder in, but everything else. So anyway, now let's get on to Efren stuff because I've shown my 2 cents stuff. Efren, what do you want me to focus on?
Pretty much this week was doing the ruined buildings, the more prominent ones on the island, which is the Officers Club over by the guardhouse, the Warden's house, and I did a little more work on the northern end of the island as well, just north of the Officers Club. So as you can see, Officers Club is pretty much done, ready for just a little more detail. There's like some rebar stuff going on that I want to also put in. I'm still not sure if I'm going to go by way of doing actual models or alpha channels, but I might go the 3D route because it's just going to look better and it shouldn't be too costly, honestly. Warden's house is definitely done. That's ready for textures. I've got some of the crumbled arcs at the top on the front end facing the lighthouse. There's going to be also I think they've cut away most of the vegetation that was growing on it. I mean, I found some pictures that look cool that had some overgrowth going on in the windows and the top of the house there. The interior, even though we're not going to have it accessible, I kind of want to make it so that, you could still kind of walk through there and check it out. Let's see what else. There is some adjustments I made on the north end of the island just to kind of line up how some of the buildings are up against the cliffside, like the quartermaster. Another interesting building that I added somewhat of an interior to, because the lower level has like a garage or storage area that is open air. Like, it doesn't appear to have any like garage doors that come down. It's just like an open warehouse where they can unload stuff and store it upstairs in the upper levels. So I need to look up some more reference as to how that area looks. Right now it's just kind of a basic sort of like, it looks like an underground parking structure. That building, I still need to do the detail for the windows and the doors, and that'll be done. And north of that, there's the model industries and new industries buildings that I needed to adjust the landscape and some of the pavement areas on there. Because like you see the quartermaster coming up, you see that bridge right there that goes across to the slope. Like, I needed to raise that a little bit, so I raised that entire slope. You look off to your left how the hillside's misaligned. I gotta resculpt that to realign it to the pavement. And then there's like, if you look down below in that little gap on the other side, sorry, you'll see that sort of storage space that they have there where they also store the little carts. So I wanted to get that in there because I thought it was like a real interesting location. I know we're not meaning to make everything enterable, but only that lower space will be enterable.
For the campaign anyway.
And I'll be
cutscenes.
All right, cool. And over here, needed to readjust this hardscape over here, raise it up a little bit, raise the buildings up a little bit, just to kind of get it closer to the real world counterpart. Got to model that piece of pavement there because I raised it and I don't want to sculpt the landscape there because the landscape sculpting can be a little screwy sometimes. So I'm just going to make a static mesh to fill that area in. And then the building next to it to the left is going to change substantially because I made the floors a little higher just to line it up to the new level. I mean, I kind of did adjust it, but all I did was punch in like a higher altitude for the building generator, but I don't like the way it stretched out the 3D model, so I'm probably going to take those back into Blender and readjust them just so that they don't look stretched and gross and it doesn't affect the textures. But yeah, I mean, got a good chunk of work done, readjusted that area because I've been eyeballing it. I didn't like the way it was looking, so those are changes that needed to be made. Up next after that, I'm going to be working on the lighthouse and all the smaller structures around the island, like the mortuary, the greenhouses. Got to do the water tower and all the small stuff like the railings, all the concrete work that you see right there, like the roads going around the island and those curbsides that you see, which is much easier stuff. So I kind of wanted to get the more heavy stuff out of the way. I know we still have like the cell house pending as well.
Last couple of structures, they'll be joining this finally.
Right on. And yeah, then it's just texturing details and getting it closer and closer to completion. What else am I missing? Oh yeah, of course, then continue populating other areas of the island, like putting storage stuff into that quartermaster building and filling in the back area where the industrial buildings are at. So glad to have gotten a good chunk of work done. And of course, the officer gardens. Yeah, that's another thing I need to
library, though. So like,
work
you figure,
into.
like, for people that were here last week.
Yeah.
My bad, go.
Yeah, I'm talking more about like the hardscapes you see where the terraces, getting a little more detail into that. so I can start putting in the garden plots and stuff like that. I'm probably gonna model out those areas rather than using the landscape because again, like the landscape, you can only use it to a certain point to where it starts to interfere with a lot of the hardscapes. And it's mostly because of the resolution, and we try to keep the resolution on the landscape like not too high, or at least manage it better. But you know how when you sculpt, sometimes you get some of that choppiness or the pixelatedness that you have to smooth out. So that's why I've been putting it a lot more like static meshes to fill those spaces in, so we don't have clipping of the landscape through these models. So a lot of the officer gardens area is probably going to be like static meshes, little garden plots made out of static meshes and just throwing dirt and plant textures onto it rather than relying on the solely on the landscape.
Okay.
Whew. But yeah, I mean, I can't wait to finally just start throwing some proper textures on this.
One of the biggest things to keep in mind, people that haven't been here on and off, is that this is going to be the new hub. So like you'll be primarily inside the jailhouse, when you can still come out here and explore the island and like run into slick soldiers that are like doing jobs and tasks. So once everything's finalized and good to go, Michael will go into this level and do an animation pass. Then when that's approved, we'll have another person go in and do an audio pass, where it'd basically be like adding ambient sounds, adding conversations, having Chris write some dialogue. And that way Cirque and the island become a character. And you can actually see, like, the idea is that you'd be able to see, like, in the background, like a simplified version of San Francisco and the Bay Area. So then that way you could see, like, how your last games are persisting in gameplay. You would see, like, spires or other things on the background. That's like a feedback loop of how you played the game recently. So that's a major design goal going into, like, this next, like, 10 years, this next, like, playtest is ideally, when we get it to where you guys can play it, you'd be after that point every week or every podcast, you'd be able to walk around the map and look for yourself how progress is going. And if you find like weird little areas or crevices or weird collision or other stupid things where you can get permanently stuck, you're always welcome to just make a bug report, because this is going to be the main menu. Like when we do the playtest, and you guys are actually like able to like load up, whether it be in co-op, whether it takes a little bit longer, we have to figure out the epic backend, and you guys are just testing more of like the single player elements. You load into this map, you'd have like a like Space Marine, you'd have like a little console, different areas that you'd interact with, and that's how you would launch into missions and whatnot, or do pandemic, or customize your operator in the firing range. So just keep in mind this is why we're showing this. This is going to be your new home every time you launch the game. And then we'd have an integration so you can watch the podcast on a mute by default, but theoretically, if you're on the main menu at the time that a podcast is going, there'd be like a TV that turns on that's muted by default, and you could watch the podcast from the main menu of the game. So it's one of those things where like we want to basically have like a feedback loop and just kind of have it to where like it's like Space Marine, but kind of like Helldivers, where you have like TVs and things that are like reminders of what's going on in the universe and the world, but also give like a cool little way of like, being able to tune into these as well. Because there's these little podcasts where even if they like when things calm down and we're not like having like so much to do, like crazy amount of work to do, we'd probably end up moving these podcasts back every 2 weeks or every month after the co-op and everything else is situated, so people can have like a break and all that. But for right now, as we're just kind of chipping away and still working towards the summer of getting everything back in from vanilla, that's going to be a major push for us, is just to keep doing these every week until the point where it's like, okay, we can kind of lower down the frequency, because the amount of updates we're going to be doing is going to be less, because we'll be looking on larger updates per se.
I've also been looking into working with geometry nodes in Blender because of all the stairways that we're going to have in Alcatraz Island. It'd probably be easier to get them generated that way rather than doing everything as a one-off, because that's going to be a ton of steps to get.
Yeah.
Like,
well, one of the things also to take into consideration is that you figure Dimitri will be joining you once he finishes the last turret. Let me think. We're going to put the sock off final redesign so he can come out. He needs to come help you with this main menu. And then, so like, yeah, it's just it's finalizing the last turret or the prototype. texturing them, getting them animated and rigged so that they're passed off to me and Derek for implementation. And then at that point, anything else is on the back burner so he can come help you on this map. And then he'd come back to the helipad and the helipad evacuation system and the civilian administration structure when we move on to pandemic mode in the coming weeks. Because you figure like there's some changes I want to do to pandemic in terms of how civilian evacuation works. Because like you figure the hand scanner was a good idea, but it should have been integrated into a structure. It should have been an automated procedure instead of having you micromanage and give scientists hand scanners and all this other weird stuff that was like, it was just too much. So that's like something that like where him and I are going to get with, but that's when I would pull him away from San Francisco North for a couple of weeks to just help me iron out and get those meshes finalized the same way we did the turrets. Okay, so let me think. What else do we have on the agenda? Anything else you two, or anyone else wants to cover for for Alcatraz? Before we move on to the next area.
I'm not sure if Donovan is here or not, but I think that's about everything.
Okay.
I've got nothing for Alcatraz.
Yeah, that's that in a nutshell. Let's see what we got here. Let me check my list.
I do love watching it like slowly build up over time.
Oh yeah,
it's really coming together nicely.
Okay. Every week there's a sizable chunk that just gets tweaked, edited, and and like you figure, I can't wait for it to be done. So then that way we can sit down and actually be able to run around and play on it. Because then I can actually get in there and I can do the scripting for Derek, and we can set up the consoles and the computers and set up the firing range for the operator, and get the customization system working back online. But basically, like it works on the old main menu. This habits where you have like a firing range or like a quartermaster that you go to, and that's where you would go to kind of do your interactions for the operators and make new operators. Let me see. I think that's everything we have in the notes. Michael, are you there? Do you have anything you want to share, or are you? I don't know if he's. I think Michael might be dead. Hello.
Hello.
Your turn.
So one thing I wanted to touch about on real quick is, so one of the big things, like we were doing the operator revamp, getting everything like, more like higher resolution. So I mean, for instance, what Robert has on his screen right now would be one of the higher resolution meshes of the operator. Another thing that I'm working on now is just kind of a weapons audit. And so the weapons audit is more just a detailed pass on all the weapons, kind of like what we did with the operators, just kind of just breaking them up to look a little better. And also going through and optimizing where they need to be optimized, which it's kind of like hit or miss. All the weapons are kind of under, I'd say 20K, excluding the operator weapons, which are a bit higher in terms of poly count. With that being said, after that, we'll be jumping into the civilians and then the infected models. And that's kind of like what's on my whole list right now. And so weapon-wise, I'm going to do a pass on the operator weapons and get those to where the textures are just a lot more poppy, especially for the gunsmith side of things. And then also the attachments as well. And once all of that's solidified and out of the way, then it will be the RTS ones. I don't know if Robert's gone over the new way that we're going to kind of do the weapons in a sense. Is so there's just way too many M4s that have, a new blueprint class for just that different. It's literally just an M4. We're going to simplify it. So something we're kind of been talking about is weapon skins, quote unquote. And think of this as like, I guess you could say like early modeling, like modding in a sense. It's adding weapon skins that just replace the current weapon. So there's going to be multiple variations. So it kind of opens the floor for a little, like, just better customization on, like, long run, especially on the operator side. Because you'll be able to say, like, let's say we have the M4, you can get, like, the Block 2, or, like, the Daniel's Defense one, like the DD M4, the Daniel's Defense. Like, there's just different types of designs of the receiver. And the idea is you can just kind of either unlock those through the operator path, etc. And that's kind of what we're kind of playing with that idea too. So there's already a different M4 skin that's already in there, just for when we get to that point, just to kind of test it out and swap it.
I'm going to add a little bit there. So
Sorry,
one
what
of
was
the
that?
things that we were keen on, and just to kind of add a little bit, is but essentially we would have like maybe, because we get a lot of variations that people suggest for like M4 variants, like Michael will say, like a CQB version, like he was saying. So when you buy a weapon, you would have a drop down, kind of like you have the camo skins for like a vehicle. And the idea would be is that you could choose different variations of M4s or an M14 or a SCAR based off of like, there's no stat change, with a different visual appearance. And that way we can add to that pool over time of like, there's like 10 different variations of an M4. There's 5 variations of a SCAR. There's 3 variations of a Glock. Like, I don't know, like that kind of stuff. So then that way it's not superficial in terms of like, you know, it's just like that one has a red dot. This one has a foregrip. And that way it's kind of like, okay, it's a little more nuanced, a little more cinematic as well in terms of basically how guns look. And we're not just duplicating C++ classes and there's no stat change, because you figure that, like Michael was saying, there's so many M4s, so many SCARs, so many Glocks, so many X, Y, and Zs that it's like this, the difference between them is negligible, especially in the confines of an RTS game and even a third-person shooter. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we want to give people more options for variation, because then that way we can, like, theoretically what we could set up even, this is just me just spitballing here now, is we could have it to where, you know, as we add new M4 variants or we add a G36 and we add different versions for that or whatever, or a P90, you could have it to where it randomly picks one, or you can, so it rotates through. Every time you build an assault, it would pick a random M4. Every time that you build a spec ops, it would pick a random vector. I don't know. And then that way, Michael can kind of interject a couple of different variations for every base weapon. And then if you don't want the randomness, you just turn it off, or you save it to a preset of like, oh, you want this squad to always have the M4 with the holographic with the laser sight on the side. So that way, like, it's all merged, it's all prepackaged, it's all super optimized. It's not a customization system. It's just little quick prefabs that we can interject into the gameplay to give people like that cinematic feel that they want, that you would see in real life anyway, that not every gun is the exact same. Like even when you play Call of Duty and it's like you run into AI and they have like a billion versions of an AK or a billion versions of like a AK-74U or an M4, we can fake that to a certain degree, superficially, visually, because that's how we did it before. We had like 3 or 4 M4s that people were asking for in Legacy. They were just same stats as different models. So that way it bakes in to what people want of the different model swaps, and everyone's happy. And it makes it very easy for us to add new variations. And the most time-consuming part of it is just to model Michael to make a new variation of an M4, which he has like a billion of like every variation of weapon. So now it opens up him to be like, okay, let me reference in these different variations of a weapon. And then now you can play with these and customize them on a per class basis or operator basis. Back to you, Michael.
I did put in 2 quick renders in the chat if you want to put them on the big screen. And those are just an example of the M4, like the swap.
I was curious, actually. This just popped into my head. I know burst weapons were scrapped because they just weren't performing very well. Are you expecting burst weapons to return for operators or even further, like RTS units?
So burst weapons, there's still a burst weapon in there. We still have the M16 A4 in there. That's still a burst weapon.
Again? I don't remember off the top of my head.
The M16 I think is allocated to every single class currently in the current build. Every class can build one. Burst weapons weren't really scrapped. It's more of just we didn't really have the time to sit down and actually, like, from a program side of things, like get them polished to where it works well. And so while it does function, there's still things to be desired, because you got to think about like how the current burst system works, how units fire, how are the burst weapons going to handle in that aspect. It's not more of a comfortability thing now of firing full auto, so we got to rethink of how that's going to go into play when they're using burst weapons to begin with. You know, so it's one of those things that we want to focus in on this time around. And that guy T-posing just broke my train of thought.
I regret nothing.
What was I gonna say?
Gotcha.
The T-posing scientist.
T-posing scientist just killed me. So somebody just posted at M4. So, like, for instance, or not M4, AK. And I did, it was burst weapons. Let's talk about burst weapons. Burst weapons are still a thing. We just need to actually polish them. But to the AK thing, I made a comment about there's no more AKs. And that was before we merged the CPO side of things. So now there's an AK. So there's still going to be AKs. I'm sorry. So there very well will be AK skins that change them from like AK-105 to an AK-12. So do expect to see some interesting.
I mean, at the very least,
there.
you just give the
Are those gas
No,
guns?
those are oxygen tanks.
Those are oxygen.
Why do they have a skull and crossbones? It's like
Because I wanted to make it to where if they got shot, like they had their own damage table, because
You're a horrible
Legacy,
person.
those tanks were actually attached via socket point, so they could have a health component, and if those got destroyed before the scientist would, they would blow up. That's what I was thinking. I was just taking out a divisions notebook on that one.
Anyone who played
That's
Halo,
why I just went ahead and put skulls on them. Just guys.
It'd be like blowing off the grunt backpacks in Halo, and they'll just fly off.
Yeah, they take off like a jetpack. It's like I saw the skull and crossbones. I thought, wait, are we getting like
because that's gonna be. I mean, I guess the fact that like they don't act, like if your back is to someone and they shoot you, GG, you're fucked. And because we don't have any like players playing as like opposition to Cirque yet, I guess it's not that big of a deal. But it's going to be interesting how this kind of.
I mean, if you think about if they get in like gunfights with like the dynamic civs and stuff like that, like the factions and stuff, when they're shooting, like for instance, the spread could hit the tank. You know.
So it's one of those things.
Can we have them take off like?
I think I just have it explode like in Division.
And when
like a jetpack slams into the ground.
On everyone.
That's one of the new scientists that basically we like showed off on Discord, but we never actually showed off on a podcast, really.
New weapon, possible gas.
I'm assuming the one operator is not in here, Michael. The badass.
Which one?
You know which one? Yeah.
The armored dude. His armor version isn't in there, but his normal one is. It's Walker. No, Hanzo is like the, I would say, dumbed down version of the badass one. Walker is the badass one. He just doesn't have.
Oh, so that was the one that had the heavily armored, like Mandalorian looking armor.
Yeah, Walker was the high end armored dude.
This is Walker too, I think. Yeah, it's just he's in an
animation. Yeah, that's the same Walker.
His face a little bit more like tense, so he doesn't look like as Walkery. But yeah, I know you figure. So that's anything else you want to cover, Michael, for what you've been doing besides just you've been optimizing the meshes. We've been going back and forth for God knows weeks to just try and keep the size maps and everything maintainable because we were very strict on like we didn't want to like just bloat up people's install directories of like 1 gigabyte characters, 500 megabyte characters. So we were trying to find in R&D the right settings because you figure the biggest thing for what Mike you want to explain
so the biggest so the biggest thing with the RTS units, I mean, I guess you could kind of show them like the size map for some of the normal Cirque units, and then we'll go into the operator like and the differences between hand. So if you see the size map size right here, this is like the stuff that really hits like performance, so like people that have low-end video cards versus like mid-range video cards where you see the skeleton.
The total I can't really see the total 318 megabytes for the medic.
Yeah, so that's basically includes every single LOD to think. So there's 5 LODs, and that will kind of help a lot with like people that are coming in with entry-level cards, because the idea is those are on one material ID, and the LOD 0 will always be the high definition one, so they won't look like potatoes. The idea is to get rid of the potatoes. So even if you're on a low end, you'll still be able to get somewhat of a coherent humanoid
There's an
on your
example
screen.
where when you swap between LODs, you can see the poly count changes drastically, and then it switches to a merged material, which is basically instead of having every material as like separate IDs, like you would have like in a Division or like a Call of Duty, it switches dynamically between these remeshed ones. That basically like LOD level 1 uses this merge, LOD level 2 uses this merge, and each merge gets more dirty and uglier the more you go down to save your VRAM. So like if you're like all the way zoomed out and you're thousands of feet up, you're using like LOD level 0 or 5 in a game, you know, because you don't need to see the nuances of each pixel and the texture. You need to just kind of get the general idea of what they look like from a top-down perspective like this. You can't tell a difference. It's a medic. You know what I mean? So there's no reason to sit there and use up thousands of triangles, thousands of vertexes, a shit ton of texture memory. So that's what he's been basically trying to do, is prototype that and determine what it needs to be for operators and what it needs to be for RTS units, but still keep it to where like we're kind of genre defining in terms of the amount of fidelity and quality that we put into our characters, because we're way above what other RTS games do in terms of basically the quality they put into the characters. And part of that is the credit of the power of the Unreal Engine, where it gives you a lot of mobility and a lot of room to maneuver to get really good looking characters, but then still hyper optimize them and be able to kind of like have a sliding scale of like, okay, like we can drop to LOD level 2 or 3, and you know their texture size and their vertexes drop substantially. So it's like, okay, like, you know, it's scalable is the idea. So that way, the idea is that if you're playing as an operator, you run into a medic, he's not going to look like a potato man. Like, cause you know, you look at a lot of RTS games like the modern Total Wars and everything. A lot of their characters, when you zoom in, don't hold up when you're super close because they have to keep the poly counts really low, and then they have to keep it even lower for when you zoom out. So one of the things that Michael's been doing is that way, like if you go up to a medic or an assault or a heavy, they look good. You know, they look like a Call of Duty or a Division or a Battlefield where, you know, and then it aggressively ramps up and down. So if I go away over here, you know, he's probably already popped his different.
The LOD, I have not set up the LOD setting thing
About.
for the actual ranges. I still need to set that up.
What was the variable? LOD visual. Fuck. I can't remember the command, but there's a command. Oh, I know. Yeah, I know what to do. Actually, I can share an example of this in practicality so we can move on. Is there anything else you want to cover, Michael, while I find this command?
I think the only other thing was I was throwing the idea of trying to keep it on releases that all the operators would have at least 2 skins. Because primarily those are kind of already done. It just really needs to be merged down in the sense for the optimization standpoint is I still need to merge them down. But theoretically, all the second outfits, and that would kind of cover the non-circ uniform one. So it's more of their unique outfit. And that one would include the badass armor for Walker. And it's more of just kind of like really individualizes them more than like better than the Circ, I would say is the best way to put it. Because right now the current one's in there to match the Circ, but the other one was going to be like
get like a
their
really
one-offs.
Unique look like you gave for Kira, where she had more of that rugged like battle horn look, like one of the ones you gave. But then you had like Walker being like a super like armored up like behemoth tank looking one. So then that way each one kind of had like a little like cool little look. Nothing, again, I'm not going to mention this now, nothing like Call of Duty fucking batshit crazy where we have like fucking Ninja Turtles running after you and shit. Like we're never doing that. We're never going to do that. Stop mentioning it. Like it's stupid. So we're not doing that ever. So we're talking like designs that make sense, like Rainbow Six Siege, like you know, some of their cool ones where you have like different like aesthetics and whatnot and designs for like maybe a Japanese or like a German one or like a French one, like the Frogmen. Those kind of designs is what we're talking about for the operators. We're not talking Ninja Turtles. We're not talking WWE fighters. We're talking like things that make sense, that are cool designs that people would want to play as, kind of deal. But anyhow, back to you, Michael. And you can see an example of the LODs where they're switching based off of like the ones that I showed, based off of proximity.
Yeah, and the operators do match the same. Operators and RTS ones have 6 LODs technically. And so, with that being said, the operators are ultimately more expensive, but the whole idea behind it is there's going to be less operators on the screen than there would be RTS characters.
Most would only ever so we talked about this earlier, and the idea is that right now I'm working on the operator switch, like I showed you guys earlier in the podcast, and I need to get the underlying system set up so that way I can have an overflow because I want to test it in the next couple of weeks. We can have dedicated operator players, and I can see how far we can push that number. So if you don't want to play with as much RTS units, you can get 20 of your friends or 10 or 15 or 12 of your friends just play, and you're just commanding and building and assisting them. And there's still some intermediary AI that you're playing from an RTS standpoint. Or maybe some of them are just fire teams and squads that you're playing in together on the ground, like in those horde maps that we were going to prototype on in the coming weeks. So that's something that I'm keen on testing the moment we can. Like literally the moment I can play this map I'm showing right now in our internal playtest, and it works and I'm happy and we have 2 players going, immediately we're going into this map and we're getting this map situated because this is going to be what you guys get to play. And it's going to be really where we kind of get all of the systems and all of the things baked in. Oh, you know what? I think I turned on that stupid visualizer normal. Thank you. Fuck off. Oh no. So yeah, this is basically our test arena that we're building up to for co-op once the other map is fully functional. Or it's going to be, this is the ideally what we'd start showing off gameplay in. And we'd be able to show like the operators running around. And then try and get as many people as we can so we can figure out the limitations and balance it and do all the stuff, because operators take up population. Like theoretically, if you get a bunch of your friends to play as operators, then they just take up the pop, and we just have a different ratio of like 2 or 4 or 3 pop for operators, because they're like 5 assaults in 1 almost. Because players will always be better than the AI in terms of communication and collaboration. Same thing. But anyhow, back to you, Michael. Huzzah!
That's all I got.
Anything else the podcast hosts want to bring up? Anyone to throw anything? Observations, questions before we move on to the Q&A section?
Observations. I mean, like for the operator stuff and the character models, I think genuinely they look amazing.
Okay.
Like, yeah. That's all that's my 2 cents. They look
and been like, this looks like
Oh yeah.
What?
It looks like shit.
Oh,
Actually,
no.
like what the hell?
Like,
Michael, back to the drawing board.
No, they actually they look genuinely very, very well done.
And the reason why we have a moat here, or whatever you technically call this, is that I'm going to be testing the ability for infected to climb. So that's going to be one of the things that we do when we phase up before we start pandemic and the doctrines and all that. Is I want to get it to where they can run up this wall and juggernauts can rampage up the wall, because then that would be the basis of making it to where they can. There's no safe harbor. So the big thing is getting everything prototyped and getting everything that I've been talking about functional on this map, making the edits to the level that need to happen, and then getting it to where you guys can play it. And then at that point, when I'm happy, then we move on to the doctrines, and then after the doctrines, we do the DNA, and then after DNA, we do pandemic and all the other stuff. So it's going to be a flow of just kind of getting everything in there so I can stop talking about it and actually put it the fuck in the game. Because I get tired of hearing myself after a while. And then they're like, oh God, when are we actually going to do this? It's taking so fucking long. So yeah, I get just as anxious about you guys about just getting shit in and getting it done at the end of the day. Anyway, anything else you guys want to add in before we move on to quick Q&A? Are you guys ready to transition over? Let's go. My body is ready.
I'm ready.
Questions on the YouTubes, on the Discords. What kind of questions you guys have for us? We have, how long do we have? About 30 minutes for questions, boys and girls. So hit us with your bangers.
Oh yeah. I've got 2 locked and loaded. Riftval asks, what has been the biggest challenge you've faced during the rebuild?
Learning replication, because you figure.
I was going to say it was probably
struggle,
multiplayer.
The biggest thing is because there's certain ways that you do, like we do it completely differently. You have to maintain and babysit and do extra steps just to make sure that all clients are kept in synchronization, and then understanding what you send to the server versus what you send to the client. And then in terms of order of operation, you have to account for latency and things arriving at different times. How do you compensate for that? Like give me an example of doing a door. Let's say, for instance, you have a door and it opens on a server. Okay, if someone joins the game 10, 20, 30 minutes after that door has been opened, the door is still going to be open on the server, but it's closed on the client. So you have to add an on rep that basically says, oh, the current state of the door is open. So when the client joins, it runs the open animation. They don't know the difference. But now it's in synchronization to what occurred in gameplay a minute ago, 10 seconds ago, 5 seconds ago. And that way it brings everyone in synchronization to the world. And that was something we had to wrap our heads around this time around. And that's one of the things that I'm looking out for when we go into this first playtest is I feel like we're going to have to add more reps to the Sky Crane, model swaps. And I think those are two things that I'm most worried about. And we won't know until we do a playtest. And then I have someone join a game like 5-10 minutes in, and we just record and we just compare and contrast what's on each person's screen, and that will form the basis of like, oh, okay, our observations were wrong. Oh, okay, our observations were right, and we fix it. So that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to kick our ass repeatedly. We're learning it. We're getting faster at the replication. We're understanding how to do things like correctly. For the first couple of weeks were the hardest, and there's still some situations where me and Derek kind of scratch our heads and we're like, fuck. Like what do we do? How do we fix this? What's the order of operations? Like, do we keep the faction manager on all clients? Do we keep it as a server only? Like that kind of stuff. Or we're still just kind of trying to learn things as we go and play testing it and tweaking it and making sure that we're always improving things as we maneuver or whatever. Next one.
Damakos asks, in multiplayer, will we be able to be with other players in the hub on Alcatraz? There is also crossed out
Lord
and
Jesus
shoot them,
Christ.
question mark.
Friendly firing was always coming. So I don't have an answer on the hub now. It's something that I want to do. I just have to figure out how to do it. It's one of those things where it's like, that's going to be one of the things that when we actually get to the point of setting up the server infrastructure with the Epic backend, we're going to have to figure out, like, is it better? Because theoretically, in my mind, it's better to have everyone join the hub and then do a map transition because the Unreal Engine automatically handles that. Or, and then just have like a server browser where people can join your hubs or they can join the session in progress. And we just have some kind of broadcast system that shows what state of the game that they're in. So if you entered a Horde map, if we ever end up adding Horde for that, you can do that. If we enter a pandemic map, they can see that. If they're in the hub, they can see that, and then they can make a decision on what they want to play. Now, there's no plans for Horde co-op right now at the moment, but that's most likely will change because we just indirectly replicated the Horde mode. So theoretically, like that mode that you saw is the prototype that we're using to get gameplay functional. So just by doing that, we just replicated Horde mode. So theoretically, now you can play with your friends now because we use that as the most basic form of playtesting and getting things online. So fun. But what else have we got?
I think I can take this one. Earth Alchemist asked, restrictor area coverage UI button, which I understand. Obviously, Robert has had me just kind of overseeing some of the UI rebuilding and a lot of the menus and stuff. I did make a note of the restrictors where sometimes if you get a bunch of them, they kind of blind you because of how strong it is. I did have a few thoughts on that, on just other ways to visualize it. Like, for example, you have the outer ring, and then rather than filling the inside, you have like a little radar loop, where like a line goes around to sort of, so you can easily visualize where the edge is. Yeah, that's definitely something I've made a note of. Obviously, right now we're working on mostly just the main actual UI menu, like your mini map, your control boxes. But yeah, I assume we'll get into that later on. And yeah, it's definitely as we go through and fix things up, we're definitely keeping an eye on places where we can fix up things that were either not clear in the past or that need just a little bit of a touching up. For example, like the restrictor UI, which can sometimes be a bit much if you've got like 4 of them.
Just reworking the pandemic mode is that there's another reason why we haven't implemented the restrictor or implemented the helipad, because you figure I want a set amount of time to not rush it and to basically make some changes that were feedback that we've heard over the years in terms of just some of the more rougher systems and how they were implemented. Or we thought they were good ideas at face value, and then when it actually came to like testing it and just the giving feedback, it was like, yeah, that did not work how we intended. It's just too micromanagey, it's too buggy, it's not fun. I mean, A, B, and C. So the restrictor is going to change. How it's displayed in the world is going to change. How the Leviathan interacts with it is going to change, because I'm personally rewriting the entire Leviathan AI from the ground up. So they're not going to operate anywhere near how they operate now, and they're going to be more of a siege unit, and they're going to be more of like a basically like a, how do I word it? They're more of a siege unit, a siege breaker, and they're more of like a backdoor opener. And like they'll only confront you if you really start to pester them and be an asshole of like hunting them, or like you just get really unlucky to just pull their aggro by making too much noise, or oh damn it, around them. So it's one of those things where like I'm gonna be working on that when we get the pandemic. Right now, there's no real reason to do the Leviathan AI and the Juggernaut AI. We're trying to get the standard infected AI and the blow up guys and the spitters where we like them, get all the core gameplay with them situated. Because the Juggernaut and Leviathan are really for vehicles and helicopters. So it's around the same time that we get those guys in, is around the same time where we feel the need to scale up to get the more higher end enemies into the game. What I was just playing was the new operator gameplay, because we actually haven't shown that in any kind of shape, manner, or form in terms of like not making it gimmicky, because the previous version of Legacy was garbage. It was a good proof of concept, but it just wasn't final. So yeah, that's the biggest thing for me, is essentially just getting it to that point and taking it in stages. So like, again, we're going to get to that foreseeably in the next couple of weeks to months, where it's like, okay, like I would say around April, May is going to be like, my projection right now is that the rest of March is going to be getting the game into a state where you guys can play it, getting that list done that I showed. And then April is going to be the whatever AI bleed over is, and then doctrines. And then May is going to be pandemic. So realistically, we're going to be aiming to kind of go into like May, June to be completely done. And even if we're not, we're on the precipice of like, there's a couple of last minute things that we're just kind of ticking away, but you guys are going to know what's going on. And there's going to be the transparency to be like, oh, I see where they're coming from. I see why some of these things are taking a little bit longer, and it's always going to be that collaboration or that communication as we go every week into those deadlines, just to make sure you guys understand, yeah, you guys will be able to play this. So when we first get that first like vertical, not even really, I guess you can call it a vertical slice. When we get the Alcatraz map and the co-op playtesting stuff, and even if it's just a single player, if we can't get the infrastructure on immediately, you guys will be able to go in and actually play as the operator, test out the progression for the weapons, test out the progression for the characters, and give your feedback. Because there's a lot that we haven't shown. There's a lot where it's just basically like entire systems that are just kind of like, okay, like, we're kind of waiting until the point where we can just kind of get it all in your guys' hands, then you can tell us what's good and what's bad kind of deal. Because the value proposition is going to be really fucking high in terms of this next rebuild, in terms of the amount of attention to detail and time and effort that's gone into this total reboot of the game. It's a brand new game at this point in terms of like how it functions. Damn it. But yeah. Anyhow, what else have we got for questions?
I have a couple of questions here, which I'm just going to roll into one. It's about operator mode. Essentially, will there be like a way to order around some like AI squad mates, not other operators, but just like
Yes,
some assaults
Legacy
that you
has
pop
that
into your
fully.
squad, such as telling them to like switch weapons to like if you've got engineers with rockets and there's a juggernaut, like being able to order them to switch rather than having
as
to
it stands
RTS
right
go
now,
and click the
we did
buttons.
not plan for being able to switch weapons. That can change. But as it stands right now, the base entry version is what we have in Legacy, but more like SWAT 4 or like Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, where we have more contextual actions of like you can right click or press a key, or like an Arma, you press the key and you can issue orders. Because in Legacy, if your operator is in a squad that has other people, if you press the directional keys, the forward key issues a move order, the back issue key issues a follow order, and I think the left key changes formations. And if you look at someone with the forward key, they will actually attack the target. So we're going to be going down that line or that direction in terms of like, okay, like we need to kind of build on that for the interoperability between the operators and the RTS elements, because you figure we want to make sure that the TPS players or third-person shooter players don't feel like they have a handicap. You know, where they just like they can't interact with entire sections of the game, and that was really important for me to get that cemented, to get that resolved this time around. What else have we got?
Someone
asked in multiplayer, will we speak to other players or will it be text based?
Okay, if I get to hear an operator like radio in and be like, Papa Bear, I got Charlie's on my tango. Can I get some fire support? I'm just gonna. This is the best game ever. All right, that's all I'm saying.
Wait, like, are you guys talking like an Arma-like radio system, or are you talking like something more basic?
Like just an in-game voice chat. So like if an operator on the ground like uses voice chat, like will we be able to like as the RTS player hear it in game as like a little radio message or something?
There's a global channel.
I mean, doesn't even need to be crazy. Just like a little bit of like a vocal filter and a way for players to communicate in game outside of.
Think of Armory Forger, right? When you're using a radio,
like a video
audio
effect. I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. Let me think about that, because you figure you go.
Except in that game, you actually are speaking through a radio. You are like you have to have a radio and an antenna and an Armory.
Well, we're not going to go that level of depth, but I would imagine that what we'd end up doing is the initial would be. Okay, so the first base version will have no text, no audio, because we're just testing the fundamental base layer of gameplay. Everyone you're playing with is someone on Discord, someone on Steam that you know. And then before it's allowed to be released like normally, before we like put it out to everyone, then we'd have to add in text, then we'd have to add in voice, you know. And here, let me write that down on my Word document. Over here is basically adding it in for audio, radio, we'll call it VFX for voice chat. Okay, so I put that down. Let me see what I can figure out for that, because that's going to be more of like an auxiliary item before everything's said and done, and we're saying, oh, it's done, you know, kind of deal. What else do we have for questions?
Yeah. Sorry. Eagles asks, has there been any thought of holding shift in order to repeat your last build option? Oh, like queuing orders with buildings as well. Yeah, I assume that would be a quality of life feature that's just kind of like,
it's not that painful.
I don't know how painful that is to add.
I've relegated that to a wish list thing where it's like I want to go back and add those kind of things like after we can get it. I'm sure, because the thing is that you figure it's a bottomless pit of things that you can add to the game and improve. You're never done with the game, you know. So at one time or another, you have to just say, okay, this is good. We need to move on. We need to push it. We need to move on to the next mechanic and the next system. So I'm being very scrutineous in terms of like when I cut the line. So that way, those things can come in after the base co-op is in there, or after things calm down and we catch up on like just getting everything cemented. But yeah, next one.
Oh, here you go.
Someone's got one here that I think Doesn't need as much explaining, but needs to know how complicated something like that would be. And it's almost everyone uses Discord. Why not just integrate it? There has been games that have tried doing that. I'm not sure if you guys are going to be able to do it, but it
What does that
hasn't
mean?
come down very well. So Discord integration is you kind
Sure.
of merge Discord into your game. So you create games have tried that. They have taken it out pretty much a week later because
I think it's
it's
one of
not
those things
worked.
where if you're gonna play on Discord, you're gonna join a voice channel, or you're gonna have a bot, or you're gonna have like a thing like in a division Discord, or I've seen on like the Project Zomboids Discord where it dynamically creates channels based off of requests by users. And then that way you're good. But then you do some kind of global voice or proximity voice in the game. You do a text chat, and that's enough. Like anything other than that, I feel like is too much. Where like those resources could go better towards the gameplay, in terms of like new systems and whatnot. So I would advocate for not doing that. For doing Discord.
Yeah, I would strongly advise against it because, like I said, there has been games I cannot quite remember what they are because they were
Okay.
shit and I refunded them. But they have tried doing the whole Discord integration stuff for like voice channels and stuff like that in game, and it has never worked. It was all buggy. You could hardly understand anybody. It would randomly disconnect someone for some reason. Like I got banned from a Discord one day because of the integration. Didn't say anything,
You have that
didn't do
effect
anything.
on
I just
people.
joined a voice channel.
You
Yeah, well, they
scare
saw it was you. They
you
were like,
scare
"Oh,
people.
this guy,
Yeah,
get him out of here."
I yep. But I think something like that is just completely unfeasible, especially with the amount of stuff that already needs to be done.
Yeah. Ross2711 asks, direct control drivable vehicles were mentioned the other day. I know this is pretty far down the road, but are you planning on making all vehicles available to drive land and air? By operators, I assume. Or will it just be a
That's a
few?
good fucking question. So, yeah.
Oh, he
That's a
also
really
says, not enough people know about this game. Will you be pushing marketing in the
One-
future as well when you're happy with the
one
new
question
build?
first, one
As
question
many
first. You're
people will
killing me.
love
Hold on.
third person shooter.
Okay, so when it comes to the vehicles, that's going to be. It depends on how it goes. Like you figure, when we get to doing re-implementing chaos vehicles supposedly already support client-side prediction in 5.5, which we need to test so that the vehicles feel responsive. So I mentioned this briefly before, but that's one of the things that we're going to be evaluating when we get into doctrines. Is that our plan is to introduce and do non-vehicles first for doctrines to get the airstrikes and the passives and the unit abilities in, and then spend the remainder of the doctrines implementation doing the airborne and the ground vehicles properly this time around, where I'm going to go and take the helicopters, and Derek is going to go and take the vehicles. And basically, when he does the vehicles, if I have to come over and help him, we'll tag team it. But part of that is testing and prototyping to making sure that the vehicles are where they need to be for chaos vehicles for the sophistication of driving we're looking for. I'm pretty sure it'll work right out of the box for driving, but we'll have to just play test it. But that is on our list because we had it in Legacy, and then we took it out because it was just spreading us too thin of like the amount of bugs or amount of things that were going on at that time. Because we had direct turret control. We had automatic turret control, so AI would shoot the guns while you drove like in Halo. And then you could get in any ground vehicle and you could drive them. But every vehicle controlled like a human being, like it didn't really control properly. So this time around, when we implement the vehicles, that's going to be on his bullet point list or his list for vehicles, is tested not only for the AI and bring over his old code from Legacy, because the vehicles in Cepheus Legacy were pretty damn good. They were made pretty damn well. They just need a little more sophistication on how they handled their pathfinding, which we learned towards the end of November and December, how that better ways of doing it that we need to implement on this next go around. So we need to basically take what we learned from legacy vehicles, apply them into this new subset, and then set up the possession depossession system that I'm going to be working so that it works with the vehicles. So then that way you can possess the vehicles and it puts your operator physically in the vehicle. So they're in the driver's seat or whatever. So yeah, that is something that we're going to be working towards. No hell, I just want to add though, Our plans are
Well-
not to add helicopter flying at this time, based off of it. Like, I have some concerns about making the helicopters feel right. So maybe it's easier than I feel like than it really is. So that's the only thing where it's like it's still a question mark for helicopter flying for operators, or for ground vehicles. It should just work out of the box. It shouldn't be that bad. So it's one of those things we're going to be looking into. What else have we got? What was your second question? You had a second question about marketing?
Yeah, the second question. Well, it was the same message, but a second question. Not enough people know about this game. Will you be pushing marketing in the future when you're happy with the new
Yes.
build?
Because part of it is basically by releasing co-op, releasing the rest of the roadmap items, and by basically fulfilling all of our promises, that in its own will increase sales, and the Steam algorithm will favor us because we'll have a co-op tag. So then at that point, that should help out for basically allowing us to A, take our contractors off of working day jobs, and then B, be able to invest in marketing. And C, to actually be able to invest more money into the game itself. So it's one of those things where we kind of see co-op as a stepping stone to more financial stability, but at the same time, the Steam algorithm would favor us more, because again, like it's more easier to sell the game for a co-op game versus a single player nowadays. So we feel like that's going to be a big step, and we know there's a lot of influencers and YouTubers that have wanted to play our game, but they're waiting until the game is done so they can judge it as a finished product. So it's one of those things where, like, I've seen it in a lot of I've seen YouTubers scroll through their library, and they have our game in their library. They just haven't played it yet because they're waiting for us to be done, so they can come in and be like, "Oh, like this is what I think about the game, blah 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 blah," or like, because like we have people that come back and play the game every year, and even when I watch like Remy or I watch like Splattercat's footage, you could tell even then they're like, "Fuck, it's taking forever. I want the game to be done. I want the campaign to be done. I want to play with my friends on co-op." So like they're waiting for that, as far as I know, for us to just be done, to have a complete, final, bugless game and have the co-op experience in. And I think that the people will come when the product is deserving of it, when it actually fires on all cylinders, when all the systems and mechanics are in there, and you don't have to fight the game as much as fight the AI. So, yeah, I think that it's going to be a stepping stone, and I think that it's going to be one of those things where we just have to be patient and just stick to our guns of just every week just chipping away, and then when we get the extra revenue from co-op, being able to invest it into ads or other stupid, I don't know, however that works. We got to hire a marketing person at that point, because that's not my specialty. What else have we got for questions?
I think you might want to
Let's see what
check
we got on
the YouTube.
Hold on. Oh, we got a lot. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I was like running through questions on Discord, and it was in the back of my head, like, there's
Brandon
probably
S.
questions
asked a
piling up on
question.
YouTube
This
too.
question probably already got
yeah.
answered, but since I'm new to this streams, when talking about the infected to the NPCs, when they fall to 0, do they model swap kind of like Flood in Halo Wars? And is the infected standard across the board, or is there a chance for special infected strains when they fail to 0 do mutation to the units? So there is a model swap. The model swap it's not perfectly in right now. It's one of those things where like they just go infected, but in Legacy they had it, and in this version they're gonna have it. So it's one of those like little behind the scenes things that we're going to put back in. Is make sure the model swap is back in from Legacy, and then making infected variations of every person or unit. We have it to where if you were a stronger unit in gameplay, like when Circ get infected, they're stronger than standard infected. They have more health. They do more damage. Same thing for the operators. So based off of the unit that gets infected, they will effectively that will influence how strong they are when they convert. Yeah, so there's that. And then we have another question on YouTube. Oh, that's not a question. That's more of a comment. He's just thanking us for our skill and passion. Thank you for actually taking the time and just jumping in and giving your feedback, because that helps us, like hearing that we're doing the right thing, that you like how we're doing things. I mean, we're not perfect, but we do try in terms of just trying to get everything situated. Let me see what we got there. Oh, Christopher von Kepler will you be planning to just keep it third-person view, or will we be having a function to aim? Myself and Michael talked about adding like a Ghost Recon breakpoint system, but that comes down to resources and having more animators. We're kind of basing that on the idea of after co-op, seeing like a tally of what resources are available to us, like how much our revenue has increased, what are we working with? So then that way we can redevelop it or maybe hire some more animators. In my mind, I want breakpoint level of gameplay where you can press a key and it brings you into first-person precision. We prototyped a really, really sexy first-person mode back in the day. Like me and Michael just sat in the room for a couple of days and it looked good. It was beautiful. But it was more so just the maintainability of keeping it working and adding new weapons. And with one animator, it was just impossible for an RTS game of our scale. So it was one of those things where it was like, we need to come back to that, I think, long term. And just, I think the compromise is making it more like breakpoint, where it's a key that you press and it's like a mode, then you switch back and forth when you want that precision aim. So yeah, I love breakpoint.
Breakpoint is such a good.
But yeah, like I need to play that again too.
I gotta play
but
it
like
again.
it's just one of those things where that's something that we're looking at. Let's see, what else have we got here? Andrew Noxia got a question suggestion for you lads. Ever thought of adding purely hostile human civilian factions working with the infected Chelsea and actively seeking to spread it? Think a fanatical cult. So that's something that me and Michael have talked about, and that's something that he's going to be designing this time around. Is when he does his civilians, there's going to be a cult group, I guess you can say, that worships Chelsea. And the idea is that they kind of be like almost the garbage men from Division 2, where they hide in the sewers. So that's something that he kind of has on his like backlog of just kind of designing. His priority is getting the current civilians, and not civilians, the current normal RTS units and the infected and the operators situated, and then after that he'll start on the dynamic civilian groups. He'll do the militants, the normal civilians, the raiders, and then after that point he'll move on to auxiliary items, like doing like more like nuanced, like more like lower chance spawning groups, like you mentioned, because that's something that I've talked about with the writer. That's something that I've talked about with Michael. And the system does facilitate it for the faction manager. Well, we can roll we can roll anyone liking anyone. We can roll anyone hating anyone. So it's one of those things where we just need the models, and just basically when we get the pandemic, because by building the framework of the civilians and dynamic civilian groups, that allows you the extendability to have it where we can have chances of like those groups showing up, and they replicate and they work because they work the same way. They just have different alliances and different, different, yeah. So that's something that we're working towards, and I don't have a timeline for that, but it's something that we've discussed and something that we're looking forward to doing in the future. Let's see. Okay, so Yukia, I'm going to brutalize your name. I am so sorry. Yukio. I cannot pronunciate the rest of your name. I had a question that maybe further down the road, you mentioned vehicles having their own formations of units. When paired with infantry and vehicles, manage their own speed for infantry. I have a proof of concept that I showed off a couple weeks ago, and that's going to be implemented when we get to the point of doing the vehicles and their interoperability and movement. So I left it here just in case that question ever comes back again. But the idea is that like here are some mock-ups of like infantry. Well, the infantry got deleted, but if I were to put in some units, the idea is that we were going to, with this second push, is have it to where vehicles would have slots that infantry would occupy, like this, around them, and then when those slots were empty, they would essentially fall in on a 2x2 column, per se, right here in front of the vehicle for the amount that there were. So the idea would be is that if there were more infantry than vehicles, they would just default to just providing operational security in front like this. And then if there were more vehicles, then they would take up the slots behind. And then that way, and then if you had helicopters, they would take up a system like this where they'd form like inner boxes, basically like forming around. So the idea would be is that in that way you have a system where everyone's trying to provide security and they all kind of stay together and they kind of pathfind for the biggest unit. So in some cases you're going to have units that they go longer routes because they have to accommodate for the vehicles. So it's not going to be perfect. So in terms of like, I don't feel like there's ever going to be a situation for vehicles and helicopters and ground infantry where the pathfinding is going to be like phenomenal, because they have to deal with the nuances of a level design and how claustrophobic certain areas can be. So I feel like this is the most meaningful compromise in terms of accomplishing a air, ground, mobile infantry formation system. And there's only one formation when you do a combined move. And then when you have helicopters, then you can get into like Black Hawk Down, like different formations where you have like 2x2s, or you have singles, or you have like Call of Duty where it's like an intercrossing like web, or for vehicles we're planning on 2 single line and the 2x2. So then that way the idea is that you figure it works with the pros and the cons of like, they're all moving together. They all ramp up and down based off of speed, and they move at the speed of the slowest unit. So in this example, the little birds and the vehicles and the ground infantry, they're all moving at the same speed, and they're dynamically going to ramp their speed down so they stay in their position that they were assigned to the best of their ability. I mean, obviously, if a building comes up right here, this guy is going to have to sway, and then when they can, they take back up their position, is the idea. So having that dynamic avoidance system, which we prototyped with the current civilians. So like if I go into here and I like give these guys a move order, you'll see like the current system where it tries to keep them together. Oh, you know what? I wonder if that might be a bug that was introduced, because Derek recently did some bug fixing for the formation system, and I think that he might have broken something. Yeah, it's a bug. So we're gonna have to look into that one, because you figure it's supposed to try and keep them together, but it's not even doing it now. So there's something going on with their pathfinding. He applied an optimization to get rid of the jitter, and it looks like he completely broke their squad synergy. So they're not even attempting to stay together like they used to. Because like right there, is the system working? Where it's falling in units and it's trying to keep them together. But then it's doing it too preemptly. Like it's giving them the final move order, but it's not holding their hand. It's giving them move orders too far in advance. And that was his solution for trying to fix the jitter, where they would jitter back and forth. That was the wrong solution. So we're going to have to go back and regroup on that now, because now the entire system is broken. Because it just this is worse than what it was in previous weeks. But when it did work, it would basically do this, where the diamonds would form in. Like that, they work there. Yeah, they're working now. So it works in a nope, he broke, he failed. You're off the island. Go fuck yourself. So you figure it's one of those things where like, that's a bug. Where basically we have to hunt that down and figure out why their squad cohesion system is like, I'm going to go the wrong way, kind of deal. So yeah, when it does work, it works, but there's obviously something that was broken in the last couple of days. In the early part of this week, it was worked on, and I guess there was a fix and it doesn't always work correctly. But you can see like that idea would apply to the vehicles and the helicopters, where they're dynamically sourcing their move locations and they're trying their best of their ability to clip in or go back or find fallback positions dynamically, because the base system in Legacy would be like, oh, my position's on the other side of that fence. Let me just run for 20 seconds to the other side of the fence. And then he dies. And you're like, wow, fuck this game. So like in this example, like he would just like, if there was a fence right here, he would have ran over here. Now he's dead. Now he's out of position. What were you thinking? Kind of deal. And that was a big issue and a lot of point of contention that we got in Legacy. Let's see if they do it here. So like in Legacy, he would go up here. But now he's like, oh, well, let me just fall back to right here, and I can actually provide security to my team being here. So this is an example where the new system works and works perfectly. Like that. Like the preview shouldn't be drawing. That's a bug. But you can see that the system is determining like, oh, like, let me not do that stupid thing they used to do. And then if enough units are told to go up there, then they will go up there. But there's a nav link that wasn't set up properly here. So for some reason, they think that it's both ways when it's only left to right. Let me just fix that now so people can stop seeing that in every podcast and think like, oh, it's a bug. No, it's literally just because the designer didn't realize you can set that. So now when I give the move order, and that's how I'm going to be doing the climbing going into the next couple of weeks. They're just nav links tied to animation montages where I interpolate them up a building. So like if I click here now, let's see if they still fuck it up. Damn, they still fucked it up. So yeah, something's wrong with that nav link. Left to right. Left to right. And then that's bloody weird. Okay, I'll have to figure out what's going on there. It might be that it's a smart link and I have to regenerate something. I don't know. It does that sometimes. So we'll have to look into that. But anyway, yeah, that's basically in a nutshell what's going on there in terms of like the movement. What else do we have for bugs? Or not bugs, I mean fucking for questions. Yeah, you know what I mean.
I was about to say, we don't want to take bugs now.
Yeah.
Do we?
It's not
Let's
respecting
have
the
a
nav
look.
link. Yeah, check YouTube for me real fast. I'm gonna check a setting.
It's so, Krieger von Clapper. Love that name. Love that name. If zombies can cross the water now, is it a random event on waterborne invasion, or zombies can just cross over even in
So
loose
the
numbers?
crossing of waters is one of those things where I'm still on the fence about, and it's one of those things where like right now I'm going towards the Leviathans and I'm pushing for the level designers to implement a secret tunnel network that connects all the islands and open that up as another front so that the game doesn't come down the bridges and there's still a constant heave and hoe that you can't destroy the tunnels, like, and they're just areas that you have to guard and set up fixed defenses and have it to where the tunnels are big enough to facilitate vehicles to go down there. So that's one of the stretch goals that I'm pushing for this time around. I don't know about swimming. I'm still on the fence about it. I know we've talked about it on and off in the past. And it's like, okay, so it's the sperm whale, infected sperm whale. It's the bridges to get around. And then it's the subway network. And then those are currently the 3 ways of getting around the island that I have right now. I'm gonna keep I'm gonna pivot on the water swimming for just a little bit longer and just see if it's absolutely needed. See, now they're working. Yeah, so it was that bloody setting. Because now it's like, yeah, weird. Yeah, because now they're all going to go up there correctly and they go the right way. Anyway, yeah, so that's the gist of what we're doing there. What else do you have for questions? On YouTube? There's a
got
bunch on
nothing.
YouTube still, I think.
See, hang on. Now, more realize subfaction simultan. Okay. The tunnels. Okay. Will you be planning to just? I think you've answered that one. Will you be planning to just keep a third person that we have in a function name? Yeah, you answered that one. I think that's it for YouTube.
Yeah, the
I think you
formation
answered
system
all
is
the ones on
starting
YouTube.
way too freaking far away. And then it gives them they need to rush. They move faster. They should be moving at their normal tactical pace. That's weird. Okay.
All right, then.
I'm not seeing anything on YouTube yet.
Did not mean to just yawn. Do we want to take maybe like? Oh, I've got a missed call. Whoops. Yeah. Does
Let me
anyone
check
else have any more
let's
questions?
see what we got here.
Anyone with hands up? No, just
Oh,
check
well, okay.
YouTube.
Let me
There's
see.
nothing on YouTube.
Let me check Discord. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions.
Hey.
Well, there's the people typing,
Yeah,
so I'll give them
I
that.
think we got them all.
I'm watching that.
Right,
I'm like, you
right.
got
So
20
just like hit us
seconds.
with your questions, so that way we can wrap up the podcast, and then that way we will everyone can run to go play Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter?
Will the
Monster Hunter,
speakers be
Michael?
louder?
Monster Hunter?
Monster Hunter? Where has he gone?
How far for Horde Juggernaut spawns? These are questions
No,
for
we're playing Monster
sure.
Hunter
Mic
after
was
this.
muted.
Jesus.
Sure.
How far for a Horde Juggernaut? I don't.
Surely speakers being louder is tied to like the volume of the file being played, right? Earth Alchemist asked about speakers being louder.
Oh. They're based off of the attenuation of how far you're away from the said object, because they're simulated to be actual physical objects or physical speakers in the world. Right now, there's no plans to make it to where they're like not attenuated, because then that way you could hear every sound at all times everywhere. So it's one of those things where we just left it that way intentionally, just so that way you wouldn't get like an eargasm. If you accidentally left 3 speakers on, all of them would be playing at any distance from you. Right now, there's no plans to change that. I know there was a question earlier in general chat, or maybe it was in the Discord, about music being synchronized between clients. That's something that we need to test and just basically see what is the best way of doing it. We're going to be just kind of prototyping if we can send music over the internet or send modifications over the internet or like have it auto subscribe stuff. That's something we need to look into. Because you figure worst case, it just means everyone has to have the same mod list and they have to just make sure they sub the same stuff. But that's something that we need to evaluate and test for. And just figure out like how do we do that and the best way of doing it. Because like you figure at face value, I'm thinking of just having it to where people just sub the same music. And then if both people have the same music, all it does is check a name. So if both people have like the same track of music that's like AC/DC, whatever, then it would know, oh, that's the same song for everyone. So let me just play it for everyone in the session. So all it does is it sends out a multicast or like a global thing that's like, hey, user 5 just played this song. And then if it would just check every other client in the game for that radio tower. And if they don't have it, it just doesn't play anything at that radio tower. But if they do have it, then it would play that song. That's what I was planning on at face value. We'll have to kind of experiment and just see how things go and, edit as needed kind of deal. Yeah. Any other questions that have snuck in?
There was one. Can you grab that, Donavia?
What'd you say?
There was one on Discord, but my phone is being a pain in the arse.
I think the one we're talking about is Earth Alchemist, and will speakers, if not playing music, be giving evac orders or curfew mandates?
No, I think that's like you just download the. You just play whatever you want. There's somebody, don't know who, did a bunch of those on the workshop. Anyway,
yes. Someone did something really clever. It was amazing. It was really well done.
Whoa.
How far in the future Juggernaut spawns? And I think that'll be our last question.
What'd you say?
How far in the future for Horde Juggernaut spawns? Excuse me.
Give me a moment. I'm going to have to investigate the duplication issue with these sky cranes going into Monday because I have no idea why that asshole spawned. I'm going to have to look into that one.
Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, no, because literally, it's 2 sky cranes have spawned and they're both playing tug of war with the barracks. See? So, like, it's literally in a state of limbo, and I'm going to have to investigate how that's even possible. Yeah, they're basically, see, like, they're pulling it.
Mine.
Like, I've never seen that before.
And
then I can even build units from it. Like, it thinks it's landed. So if I destroy those units and then build. Huh. Well, let me build. It must be a desynchronization
bugs,
between the
there's features.
population. It must think it hasn't
Yeah.
landed yet. I'm not sure. Wait, no, but I can purchase one of that. But oh, it's my money. Okay, that must be a bug desync. Anyway, what was the question? About the Juggernaut. Juggernauts will come in. Let me think here. The Juggernauts are basically the early was something fix whatever for armor for bases, defenses, emplacements. So I would say around the same time we get the turrets online, because we're gonna have to sneak the turrets in sometime around that that docket, that list coming into the next couple of weeks. So it's gonna be tight. It's gonna be like the Juggernauts are gonna come in around the 11th hour as well, as we just try and hunt down, get these bugs eradicated, and just get the game back to where it's gonna be. I can't tell you a definite day. I just know it's gonna happen in the next couple of weeks, because you figure like it's very fluid, and like you figure this bug is new, so I have to go hunt this down going into Monday. Good thing I got it on stream, so I know exactly what I did, so I can go back and figure out what's going on, to why they think that this is okay. So yeah, I don't have an answer on the Juggernauts, but they will be coming in the next couple weeks. Anything else?
Cool. No, I think that's everything. We can
I think
wrap
that's
up.
everything. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate you guys coming in and just kind of seeing what kind of work in progress we've done this week. If you guys want to, support development, feel free to check out one of the support packs on Steam, buy the novel. It's on Amazon and it's on Steam. There's the Patreon. Michael has been pushing like a weapons support thing. So we're kind of like trying to there's some people that pledge it, but if you want to add suggestions for weapons, we have like a tier for that now, where you can basically just pledge a certain amount, and then after a couple months, you get to pick a weapon. You get to work with Michael to pick a weapon. So that's something that he's been pushing and essentially just kind of getting in there. That's where the FAMAS came from. And then I think there's the guy, he basically picks a new weapon every quarter and works with Michael. And that kind of helps support our development as well. So it's one of those things where if you're interested in that, feel free. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming, and we will see you guys next